Good morning, everyone. For today's panel, we got a very interesting topic, which is regulation. Thankfully, we're in Regulation Day, therefore this must be a topic of your interest. And the way that we would like to articulate this panel is starting with different questions for the different amazing speakers that we have, and for them to be open to reply to each other, so it becomes as well a conversation with everyone. And let's start with the first one, which is the following. We're talking about regulation and blockchain and crypto. And when we're talking about regulation, we're most likely as well talking about the importance of advocacy as well as public-private articulation and how it works in our business. So I would like to start with you, Connor, and let's start with what is advocacy and public-private articulation and the importance and the role that it has in an industry?
Yeah, thanks so much. And so my background prior to joining the Ethereum Foundation was co-founding the Blockchain Association in the United States and Canadian Web3 Council in Canada. So those are industry associations in the space. And then also a think tank in DC that lobbies in support of legislation that incentivizes decentralization. And so I've kind of, over the last 8 years of working in this space, full-time in advocacy, seen the ebbs and flows of what it means to be advocating. Primarily, my focus has been the United States and Canada and a little bit in the EU. And so I look forward to hearing more about the Latin American experience. But what I've seen and what is critically important now is that most of the organizations that are here are not represented in any way in DC. The organizations that are represented in DC are the organizations that have had to work with policymakers and regulators for many years, and they've established strong policy teams that have a lot of reps in speaking with the Securities Exchange Commission and policymakers, and they understand how to get around the hill. But those organizations, like those maybe in the Ethereum community more broadly, those projects, those applications, those builders that are building the products on chain, not just the centralized exchanges, but those folks who are building privacy preserving technologies, those who are running validators, those who are building layer twos, they have not been in DC. So their voice is not being heard. A lot of them don't have anyone on the policy side. They have general counsel who maybe have no policy experience whatsoever. So they've not contributed resources to these endeavors, and they have not use the muscle necessary to understand how everything is going to work in future. I can tell you about the American experience. We are currently drafting market structure legislation, and legislation passed through the House, the Clarity Act, very recently, and now negotiations are ongoing in the Senate. And if that piece of legislation passes, it will set the course of this industry in the United States for an indefinite basis. If it doesn't pass, then it's open season, and whatever Securities Exchange Commission is in power is going to have a lot of leverage, or Commodities Futures Trading Commission is going to have a lot of leverage over the industry. So now is the moment to be in the room, and I'm afraid we're already much too late to be participating in that discussion. And there's a lot of great people who are up there helping out with market structure legislation. There are many, many voices. There's been a lot of money spent in DC recently on the election cycle, on advocacy for crypto. But if folks like those in this room today and their companies don't participate, don't attend, don't provide resources to industry associations or advocacy organizations that are speaking on their behalf in the United States, but also globally, right? This is not by any means simply an American situation. Then we will be left with the rules that have been created by other actors.
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. It's a real pleasure, and I have to say, traveling between different conferences here, it feels very different. It feels real. Like comparing to some of the places in Europe when we talk about crypto, it's something that's cool, something that you invest money, you make money, something that like you buy a new car and you show to your friends. Here you have a car to drive to work. You take your kids to school, have it on weekends, have it for emergencies. Here, it's much more real. In Europe, it's a little bit more plastic, I would say, in some places. Here, it's real. And for me, working in crypto, being here makes it much, much more meaningful for working in crypto and doing and delivering things for people in LATAM. So really glad to be here, and thank you. What I see in terms of regulation globally, that crypto and regulators are in arms race, competing. And you know who's going to win. It's going to be crypto, for a very simple reason. Crypto is more unified community. It has infinite resources, and it has the best talent. And if just taking a simple example, if I don't know, if you're a student, you're finishing Buenos Aires University, and you have an opportunity to go and work either for the government or for one of the great Latin exchanges, Bitso, right? Great company. And I'm pretty sure 90% of the students would go work for the crypto exchange because it's double the salary, more opportunities, flexible working environment. And then it's not for us to decide what the future is, it's what the most talented people will do. And they will go to crypto and they'll decide the future. But the problem is that we've been here before. Back in 2008, 2007, when the most talented people went to work for investment banks and created the products that no one really could understand, let alone supervise and control. Bankers didn't lose, they won. Regulators also, they didn't lose. The ordinary people lost most in the global financial crisis. So in order to avoid that, regardless of how big the crypto companies are, how influential they are, how much talent we have to work with the governments to avoid what was happening back almost 20 years ago, to ensure that the market is sustainable, to ensure that we're compliant, to ensure that we actually serve the purpose or not just make money. And I believe that this is what's coming next, is the cooperation between the crypto companies and the regulators, which makes it much, much more meaningful, and especially here in LATAM.
Just want to add one thing that different to what you said in the US. We have been seeing what Coinbase did in Stand with Crypto, different efforts. So the reality here is very different. Lobby is not regulated. We cannot fund a PAC. We cannot like support candidates that are going to run on a for crypto position. But I have to recognize one thing. In a country where we are used to learn about new regulation by reading the newspaper, that always take like the private sector by surprise. The regulators has been working good on the beginning here because they summon the private sector. We work together on a public-private table to try to discuss. They were eager to learn what was happening at the crypto industry before regulating. And then the decisions has been taken by them because that's their job. But at least we have some prior job. And that effort didn't change between the change of our presidency. So it was an effort that was sustained between two different governments. That's being said, once the regulation have been issued, it's been very difficult, like to try to access them, to try to have some kind of formal relationship with them, because it's a country where like the access you have to politicians is informal, where you have to work your way through, like go in different channels, where it's very difficult to try to go and discuss. The aftermath of the Libra case here has been, or has put crypto in a very difficult position because no regulator want to discuss seriously without political implication what's happening here. So it's kind of a like two-sided situation in which at the beginning it was like a very good signal that the regulator want to work with us. But then like working in a regulated industry also requires for the regulator to hear what the private sector has to say and to act or at least to provide feedback, even if they agree or don't. But I think the private sector remains relevant here and has to have their voice in terms of regulatory stuff.
Can I just jump in very quickly? A little piece of advice, and not for me, of course, to consult you, but I was a regulator and a politician in my previous life.
I'm sorry.
And I know that, of course, I've done the two most hated jobs in my life, in generally professions. I was an investment banker and a politician back home. So I've done my volatility training. But as a politician, when you sit there and the business comes to you and they say, well, we want this and that and change, you have to vote one way or the other way, you don't tend to listen. What you do listen to is when you open up the newspaper and you see that there's a crowd in Devconnect who says that, crypto is the future. We need the crypto payments. We need crypto transfers. We need stable coins happening here daily, accessible and transferable from one technology to another, acceptable globally. That's when the politician starts thinking. And that what drives them in proper democracies. And I believe it's what you have here. It's a great country. And that makes a change. So these events have much, much more power than when the business or the lobbying group comes into the meeting with the politicians and ask them to change the law.
Yeah, my take on that is that we should take the politicians out of the conversation because of the volatility of the newspaper. You know, if each day you will have a different stance, that's a problem. You know, as a founder, you need to build, you need to engage with institutions, you need to talk with the technicians in each one of the regulators. Central bank here used to have these innovation roundtables, which was builders talking with technicians about what should happen in order for the industry to thrive. So my view is that builders should be building and talking with the guys that will be applying those innovations, and not in the political sphere because of the volatility, because usually you change every 4 years also, and these are multi-cycle processes. Usually in an institution like a central bank or the CMB, you have people with a career. In the next 20, 30 years, they're going to be there working day and night on how this will hopefully thrive, you know. And that's why I tend to be more sketchy about engaging with politicians, because in general, it's more on how they use you to position themselves than actually helping you achieve what they want, what you want to do, you know. And it's not nothing personal. I think it's part of how politics in general works, you know. And as a founder, and I'm thinking about not Coinbase, which is huge and have infinite resources, but two guys in a garage, how do they engage, you know, with these people? It's impossible. They don't have time. They don't have, I mean, if they meet with a politician, it means that they are not shipping the product. It means that they are running out of runway. It means they are going to die. Hence, you know, it's kind of this kind of cycle which ends up poorly for everyone, you know?
You're making my job as a moderator really easy because it became a very fluid conversation, which I appreciate. I believe this first part of the panel has a lot of important takes that we can mention. As an example, we started talking about the importance of advocacy and public-private articulation to, as Connor mentioned at the beginning, have our industry and our different companies and startups have a voice, and to also provide different resources to those policymakers in relationships that might take years, and speaking the same language. So by the moment there are decision makers pressing a button, then the future of our industry has our voices and also our resources embedded within them, which I believe kind of applies as well with the rest of the feedback given by our speakers, in the sense that if you have an open regulator to have those conversations and also being able to represent the interests, let's call it a community that you could either see on the newspapers or the builders that maybe lack the skills to speak the same language, is that we can start building together and against this idea of competition, but potential collaboration. In the end, we're talking about translating the interests of different parties that I believe also go beyond just public sector and private sector, and start helping us see this ecosystem of national sector, for example, government, regulators on another side that are more than just multi-cycle, and also financial institutions, traditional markets, universities, communities and builders, and how to have all of them aligned, or at least speaking.
Chambers have been doing a great job. FinTech Chamber here in Argentina has been pushing, you know, in every direction to make FinTech, you know, as an industry, both crypto and other stuff, happening and become more professional. I think those things are super important. The thing that you have been doing with Crecimiento, I think it's awesome also. No?
I very much agree. We actually had a meeting as Bybit and our CEO, Patricio, here. We had a meeting with Argentinian FinTech Association, and it seems like they're very professional compared to what I see in many other places around the world. They're very professional, really motivated. They get the small startups and the big startups. They have this tiered membership fees, which allows the small companies to enter and the big companies to contribute more. They have the meetups. They have the specified gatherings for particular topics and engagement with the government as well. So I believe that you've got it here. You've got the fundamentals that the people actually are eager to use crypto. You've got the government who seems to be listening, and we saw here on the stage the representatives coming and discussing opportunities. You've got the associations, the chambers uniting the people. And I believe that in Latin America, it's one of the most exciting places to be, because crypto here is meaningful. It's not just about making more money, it's about actually getting along every day. And again, for someone coming from crypto world, for me, it's really meaningful to be here.
I do agree that we need to be better at explaining why it is important. For example, what had happened with Libre in Argentina has been kind of an atomic bomb for the sector in a way. Because usually, for example, what happens with journalism is that there is some sort of Ponzi scheme popping up, and automatically in the news, the image that they use is of Bitcoin, which is nonsense. And we all know about that. But regular people do not know about that difference between one and the other. And so being kind of really well educated in terms of the details, the importance, the impact, I think it's super important. And I think that's one of the things that we need to accomplish,
I think one of the, following up on what you have said, is the coordination between the different players in the industry is super relevant. So, for example, we've been seeing that, so all of us are like competitors, but we kind of have a healthy competition. The problem is in a different size. So in Argentina or like different countries on Latin America, the average amount of people that have held or hold crypto is between 15 and 20%, which means 8 out of 10 people still don't have crypto and never have bought crypto. So that creates a big opportunity to go and chase after them and not cannibalize our own customers, which means we can dedicate some common effort to try to coordinate some stuff, because at the very end, even when we are working and like selling the same products, we want the same for us to happen in the industry. And we are going to be stronger if we are going to lobby the government or like talk with regulators if we are going on a coordinated stance. That's why like chamber, the fintech chamber is super relevant. At some point, I think it will become like harder to coordinate between different companies because, well, or at least that's what I've seen happening with banks or like with different fintechs. But at least I think now crypto has the unique opportunity to be coordinated in major topics because it will be easier and more effective to try to pitch some stuff we need for the regulatory part.
I think just kind of dovetailing on some of those points. When we think about the regulation, and this is kind of a question for later too, or a response about what we want to see in the future, but when we think about the regulation that we're producing now, what will be critically important is minimizing the crises which we've seen in this industry over and over. And I was in lobbying in the U.S. during the Terra crisis, during the FTX crisis, and both of those set the industry back by years. And it also put us in a position, there was an ideal case for crypto where none of that existed. Everything was still rosy. Maybe there was just Bitcoin out there, and all of a sudden regulations were made and they minimized these kinds of risks, and the public perception of crypto wasn't as negative. And it's outsized negative after an issue like that, and you really have to come back from that. And I can tell you, relationships with the Democrats it's not come back since that. FTX or SBF at FTX was very close with the Democrats, and as a result of that, they were very much burned after FTX collapsed, and that's sort of been the legacy of their relationship with crypto. If that keeps happening over and over and over again, the industry gets shut down, right? That's what ends up happening.
I have a question there, and this is kind of I have a thesis around that, which is, if you go walking the street and you ask about FTX or Terra, I would assume that 99% of people either don't know or don't care. It seems like, or either the people that care are the politicians and the people in the industry. Everyone in the middle is like, I have other problems,
Yeah, it really depends on what country you're from, right? Because FTX was huge in the United States, and it was a huge front page Wall Street Journal over and over again hit. So a lot of people knew about it. They didn't understand it. They thought FTX was crypto, so crypto was bad because FTX was bad, and that's as far as they went, which is the problem. I mean, FTX was a centralized exchange, completely unregulated, lots of internal accounting issues and fraud issues, and that was its legacy. But maybe in the same way that Libra was an issue here, but globally it's not very well known. I think those domestic issues are really what sets these things back.
Yeah, but I can relate because like after Libra case, I read everywhere like this Bitcoin scandal, which was like you don't know what you're talking about.
If I may also add, because now we're also talking about how things that happen in the industry end up affecting the vision or the image that regulators or public sector has when it comes to the industry itself, some kind of a bad loophole that's really hard to penetrate afterwards. But on the other side, I would also like to have your views and experience of when has regulation in different countries that you work with been something fruitful for the industry, and when has it been the opposite? Because not always to regulate is something that is positive to what we're trying to achieve.
I guess the interesting example in Europe is MiCA. So MiCA regulation is markets in crypto assets. It's the gold plate sort of regulatory standard that many countries have been following. Even US have taken within the Genius Act certain elements. Pakistani authority, Middle Eastern authority, Hong Kong, Singapore authorities, they've all been trying to take the good stuff out of the MiCA and leave the bad stuff out. So there are some good things and the bad things. The good things is that Europe has been trying to protect customers, protect consumers, and making sure that the risk that they take are controlled and they understand those risks. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that the risk appetite for people has changed over the last 50 years. If we take 50 years ago, you had one house, one car, one job, and you didn't have much social security. Therefore, you were not likely to take any risks because you didn't know what's going to happen. Now we've got so many financial instruments. You have so much social security elements, safety nets, and therefore people take more risk. And you cannot assume regulation based on what was 50 years ago. Today people do take much more risk, and the regulation has to be centered around it. And the regulation has to make sure that the individuals are educated in taking the risk, not stopping them from taking risk, but having an educated position. So Europe is doing that, and is at least trying to do that. In Asia, you have significantly less regulation. So customers are less protected, but at the same time, we have huge innovation. The engine of innovation, the power of innovation that is happening in Asia is nothing compared to what we see in Europe with regulators trying to protect customers. So I see the good sides of regulation and engagement, but at the same time, there are the downsides as well.
Do you know when airplanes get safer? After crashing. The same happens with the financial industry overall,
So after Libra, now it's much safer here in Argentina,
No,
and I'm
it's
sure
not.
it's safer
No, it's not.
in the United States too.
No, it's not, because the regulation didn't change at all, and that's fine. Even though I think we need to improve. So let's go back 1 year and a half ago. They introduced VASP licensing here, which I think is helping to give more security to the consumer, which is great. But that didn't allow, Libra to pop up, which was basically a meme coin in a way, or this, I don't know what to call it, and it's not within the orbit of control of the CMB either, because it's pure Web3, So we are in an industry which is really difficult because you are kind of trying to regulate what is happening in the country or within the users in a country with the technology which is global by default also. So those things, it's kind of contradictory in a way, I don't have an answer, either. No.
I have a little, just very small interruption there. From my personal experience, grass is always greener on the other side. So, for you being here in Latin America, so you see the risks, you see the challenges, you see the previous scandals. For me as a European coming here, I see incredible opportunity. You have people using on the ground daily crypto. I would dream about that. I was telling my friends back home yesterday on the phone, I said, guys, people are living here. Crypto in Argentina is one of the best places to live. You've got great food, great people, sunshine, and you've got people using crypto daily. It's incredible. And all the opportunities now with the global companies, and you've got Binance, you've got Bybit ourselves, Bitso, and every other global company is coming here to build the ecosystem together. So I'm really bullish on Latin America and especially Argentina. Of course, in Brazil, you've got some capital controls and taxation of transactions coming. We need to work around that. We need to comply, but opportunities are here.
I agree. No, just one little caveat there. So I think like regulation, like particularly the VASP regulation, not only in Argentina but also in Brazil, which is undergoing, and we have some pending debts in Mexico and Colombia, which are our other two major markets, have helped for banks not closing our bank accounts, have helped for having our users' funds protected. However, like that use cases that you mentioned are true. But this is a fairy tale that when you work on the trenches every day here, it's very difficult to comply with the nonsense of some regulations. So for example, we have a tax situation that is super discriminatory or unfair compared to banks or to fintechs, and that's because we were burdened with this tax when crypto was not regulated, and we have been regulated for more than a year now, and the tax situation have not changed, and that's because there's no politician wanting to tackle crypto issues because of Libra. There's no politicians wanting to tackle tax issues because of permanent political campaigns. And that makes very difficult for us to be profitable, to be secure, to be transparent, all at the same time. Even when we have cool use cases,
So maybe kind of do you know that in Argentina we have a law called a law for incentivizing bank transfers, which charge you 1.2% on the transfer of money. So instead of incentivizing the use of electronic money, they are taxing the use of electronic money. I want to set up this clear here. And VASP licenses are not exempt of that tax, which against brokers who are exempt of that and banks, we are being discriminated in a way and not applied in the same manner. So if we want, and we want to become kind of the best industry in Argentina to thrive, we need to tackle this ASAP because it's hurting the economics of the industry, which, as you know, we're in a business. We need to make money, and I think that's an important and relevant thing to tackle.
You're not putting me off. I'm still in love with Argentina. I believe there's so many great things here.
That actually aligns. I think that everything that's being said in this conversation is pretty aligned, especially the opportunities that we get to see in Argentina. But usually when we see opportunities, we also think of them as windows of opportunity that we want to take so we're able to specify and represent this kind of industries, the harm that they can do in the industry, like you were mentioning, Manu, and as well the necessity of doing this in this very moment, so we're not too late, like you mentioned, Connor, in the US. And this has been a good take on what you guys think that current regulation is actually hurting the industry and what to do about it, which is very specific because sometimes it's hard to have a whole industry or type of companies together when it comes to a specific claim to a regulator and to be able to be so specific, which is useful. And now we are almost just 10 minutes in the panel together. And I have another question, which I am very interested to see your takes, which is, if we meet again in this panel in Devconnect, maybe it will be Devconnect here in Argentina again or not, but if we're again in Regulation Day 3 years from now, what would you like to see have happened with regulation in your industry or when it comes to your different jobs?
Can I try? Yeah. So for me, it's a little bit like, when kids, when you're a kid, you're dreaming that you're going to grow up and be someone. You're going to be a Spider-Man. You're going to be a Batman. You're going to do something crazy in your life. And I believe that now is the time actually to deliver for the industry. We've been dreaming of new products, new services, but I believe now is the time to go get a costume and start actually delivering, saving people, saving lives, doing something meaningful. And if we compare, people get very excited about crypto. They say, "Wow, this is changing the world now." Changing the capital markets, we're so huge, so important. But reality is, if you compare to traditional finance, which has 7 trillion daily FX transactions, plus equity, plus bonds, so you've got daily roughly $9 trillion in transactions. Crypto, at best, you've got several hundred billion. So it's 1 to 2%. And if we want to make the change, actually, it's not competing between each other. And I'd rather work with you and lose than fight against you and win, because we have to go after the traditional finance, and it's a huge market there, and that's the opportunity. And for me, a few years back we talked about stable coins. This year it's all about tokenization. For me, next year and the year after is about execution. There's no time to dream. It's actually about time to go and deliver.
So we've been delivering since 13 years ago. I think it's more on. I think it's important to understand that money has 100,000 years old, and in the financial industry, 500 years old, and we just scratching like 15 years old of the industry. So I think that order of magnitude it's important to take into account. At least in Argentina, there have been a lot of things to happen. We have been penalized by a lot of the risking of being the bad actor of the financial economic. We are the most debtor of the IMF, and that's not free in a way. We should have much more capital flows getting into Argentina to invest into builders, and that is not happening because until like a few years back, Argentina was bad word because of mostly politicians, doing bad things in their work. So I think we need to kind of understand that this is not going to go from 0 to 1 in a couple of years. This will take a few decades, I'm sure. The good thing is that in general, when you see curves of adoption, they tend to go vertical really, really fast comparison to others. So I'm really totally aligned with you in terms of this is coordination. This is a group. We are all convinced that the kind of what is the future, what should happen, and embrace that mask and go and win.
For the next 3 years, I want to see mainly three things. One, I want this 20% or 15 to 20% people holding crypto be more than 50%. So I want like people embracing crypto. And for this, we need like banks to be on board, fintechs to be on board, regulators to be on board. Second, I want the money to be on chain. So kudos to Manu and other big Argentinian companies like launching Argentinian peso stablecoins. I think like that's the way that our industry should be thinking about. And for the third one, I want for regulators to be caring of just one job, which is protecting the users from cowboys like SBF, like Terra Luna, these like companies that promise you like 700% APR, I don't know, like from where. But I don't want that process to mean for me that I should ask for permission on every single feature and product I want to launch, which I'm frightening that it's kind of becoming the case. Yeah. I don't think that's the good way to regulate. So I think like these next 3 years should be about this.
Because I think so much foundational legislation could come to be in the next few years, I want to see regulation that really distinguishes between different parts of crypto. Because I think that there are, and many of us in this room would agree, there's a lot of garbage out there. And I hope it disappears because, the 700% return or any of those sorts of products, we want to rise above that. We want to see real products built in crypto because there are only a few examples like stablecoins, maybe digital identity, of particularly compelling use cases today, or particularly non-financial use cases in particular. And the reason for that in part is because institutional adoption has been very difficult. It's very challenging for builders to build things when they're constantly threatened by a variety of regulators who could be very aggressive towards them. So if we are able to, in the next few years, set out some of the ground rules that allow for decentralized technology to flourish, because that is the true innovation here, then I think we're setting ourselves up for in maybe hopefully 3, but maybe 10, 20 years, the products that are truly game-changing in this space, because we don't have too many of them yet. And I'm excited about getting them. I understand why they're not currently there, but if we get the rules wrong, then we'll never get them, and this industry will really not meet its potential at all.
When we're talking about getting the rules right or wrong, and the difficulty of creating this setup or the foundations for the next years to come in this industry, do you guys already think of one country on one regulator or one specific piece of regulation that goes like, this is a little bit of a North Star, or this is a good path to continue following?
Yeah, I think Argentina is doing a great job. I think Argentina,
I agree.
We are leading the fucking way. So we need to make Argentina kind of an example. if we solve the tax issue, which I'm confident will happen, and we kind of be more honest about the industry of money, I would say, not token, not fiat, the industry of money, the financial industry, and we get a more technical view of what should happen to reach 50% adoption in next 3 years and hopefully 100% in the next 10. I think we can actually accomplish a lot. Argentina has been this powerhouse of crypto innovation. I have the pleasure of have accomplished ourselves as part of the companies that I've led to onboard the first bank globally to the Bitcoin network in 2018 to do cross-border payments when stablecoins were not even a thing, allowing banks to reduce the fees 300%. A few years back, we connect, Argentinian users with Brazilian merchants with stablecoins and PIX, allowing a market of 300 million users to onboard into Brazil, and we do the same in Argentina, all thanks to crypto. So if we kind of set up, a good path of building and have peace of mind, that things won't change every 2-3 years, we can become this powerhouse of innovation.
I have the fortune of overseeing the regulatory affairs at Bitso in South America, and by far this country is the most happy to work on this kind of issues. Like Colombia, Brazil, they were more difficult. The feedback from regulators is not the same that we have here. So I think I agree with Manu that here is a good way that they are framing the regulation. I agree. So following up to this panel, there will be members of Congress here. So please do ask them to deprecate this tax situation. They're going to have a tax reform discussion in the next months. So I think what we need is for that to not be a problem over our heads, and we will keep delivering and building products for you guys.
I think from my experience, it's like in every relationship. We have to work to and put effort to make it happen, and be it Argentina or Brazil, Lithuania, United States, Pakistan, Vietnam, Singapore, so many different places. And I've always seen that it's the same thing. If you sit down and you plow and you try and work hard, you can make it happen. So and I believe that you can make it happen here in Argentina, but it's just that it takes the effort of communities, chambers, associations, builders, big companies, small companies, employees actually lobbying and saying that we want to have these best paid jobs, flexible with opportunities here in Argentina. I think that gives an opportunity.
This is going to be a really niche call out, but the Danish Financial Authority produced a paper on decentralization, and I loved it because it was so in the weeds, and it was such a clear demonstration of how technical the team was there and how much time and effort they spent on thinking really critically about these issues, because so often they can just be dismissed by people who don't want to engage with them. So that kind of activity is the kind of activity we need to see more of.
I'm happy to see that, or for the pattern that I've seen is some of the things that we wish to happen in the next year from a regulatory perspective, or the objectives themselves, need that small regulatory take to unlock the advancement and the evolution. Like, for example, if we're talking about, like you said, Julián, on a bank having over 50% of people utilizing crypto or blockchain and having banks being enabled to provide services, digital asset services, that means that we would need a regulation that enables it. Considering that regulation is regulation, deregulation is regulation, and no regulation is also regulation, so we can kind of create that environment. And now, being only 1 minute away from the finishing of this panel, if you guys could only in one sentence express what would be your hope, at least for your industry, to do for public sector, I think that could also be good, so we think about the two different hats that are being put on.
Yeah, to make Argentina great again.
I think I want money to be on chain.
I think for the industry is to actually execute of what was promised, and we have so many products and services globally, but we actually need to deliver here to the people on the ground. And the next few years working with the regulators, it's about execution. It's about delivering things that we have promised as an industry. Because I've been seeing in conferences years and years over and over, there's so many people dreaming about new products, new opportunities, but now it's the time actually to deliver. And be it small companies, large companies, regional companies, international companies, we need to deliver.
Protecting decentralization and privacy in legislation.
Yeah.
All right, that is time for us. I want to say thank you so much to Connor, to Mykolas, to Julián, as well to Manu, and everyone for being here and for the next panels to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you.